Okay, good morning or good afternoon, rather. Good afternoon, everyone. It is good to see you. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and today is Wednesday. It is October 27th, and we're getting ready for Parshas Chayei. Now, I'll tell you something. This is my bar mitzvah parsha. This was the parsha that I learned for my bar mitzvah, Chayei, and I always tell bar mitzvah kids that I learned a very valuable lesson at my bar mitzvah. I had worked with my father on preparing a speech, a Divrei Torah to give at the bar mitzvah, and it must have been like 2 or 3, maybe 4 pages long. And I made the mistake of not stapling the pages. And I don't know how it happened, but I forgot the last page of the speech at home that morning, that Shabbos morning. And we went to shul, and I'm delivering my speech to everybody, and I turn to where should be the last page, and it's just not there. So I had to ad lib. I think I did a good job, doing all my thank yous or the rest of the speech and closing it up. But ever since then, I always advise the bar mitzvah boys, make sure to staple your pages together. You don't want to find yourself in that situation. So that's something that always comes to mind as I prepare Divrei Torah for Parshas Chayei. Okay, so let's see. We are going to see some interesting sources this week. The first couple sources all revolve around the same theme, and I want to share that with you. This is a fascinating theme. So let's see. The Parsha begins, tells us the first 2 psukim, Vayiyu Chayei Sarah, Me'ah Shana. How long was the life of Sarah? It was 100 years, Esrim Shana, another 20, V'sheva Shemin, 7, for a total of 127. Shnei Chayei Sarah, those were the years of Sarah's life. Vatama Sarah beKiryat Arba. Sarah passed away in Kiryat Arba. He Chevron, that's synonymous with Beretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Vayvo Avram l'spod l'Sarah v'libkosa. And Avram comes back to Hebron, where he had been away. Commentaries explain where he was. This is right after Akedas Yitzchak. So he comes home from Akedas Yitzchak, and he eulogizes Sarah, and he cries for her. Just so everyone knows, the way the psukim continue is Avram purchases a plot of land where he can bury Sarah. That's what we know as the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, that double cave that is in Hebron. And this Shabbos in Hebron, every year they always call it the Shabbat Hebron. It's a very big deal where people come from all over Israel to Hebron to spend Shabbos there, show their support, their love for the Jews who are living in Hebron, as well as to reassert the fact that this is the week that we read in the Torah about the claim to Hebron, that Abraham purchased this land. This is going back about 4,000 years, that there is a Jewish claim to Hebron, and let nobody deny that. So it's something that always takes place every year in Hebron. I know that the last year or two had been, I don't know if it took place because of COVID. If it did, I'm sure it was very small. But in regular years, there would be thousands of people come, and they bring tents. They tent out in all the local parks there, and there's big communal meals. But it was a big deal. Shabbat Hebron. I got some emails this year from the Hebron organization. I believe it is taking place. I just don't know if it's in the same fashion, in the same large degree. I guess it's going to all depend on what the Israeli Health Ministry does. So let's see. Those are the first 2 psukim in the parsha. There's a fascinating Balaturim that points out, if you notice the last word in the first pasuk, it said, Vatama Sarah beKiryat Arba. She passed away in Kiryat Arba. He Hebron, that's synonymous with Hebron. Beretz Canaan, that's in the land of Canaan. Vayvo Avram l'spod l'Sarah v'libkosa. Avram comes back to eulogize her and cry for her. Now, I should have done it, but I didn't. The font in the Torah, that chaf in libkosa, the tradition we have is that chaf is always smaller than the font of the rest of the letters. So here you have the libkosa, that last word in pasuk beis, the last word in second verse. So you have the vav lamed beis, and then it should be, they're all one font, and so is the saf and the hey at the end of the word. But the chaf, that's supposed to be a smaller font. If you look at a Sefer Torah, you'll always see it's a smaller font. So the Balaturim, this is one of our Rishonim, he says that it's no accident. That's supposed to symbolize something. It says, the Libkosa, the Balaturim writes, Chaf Ketana. The Kaf is supposed to be a smaller font. And again, if you look at any Sefer Torah, that's the way it is. What does that indicate? Shlo bacha ela ma'at. This is to remind us that Avram only cried a little bit. He didn't give it his all when he did his crying. What was the reason? Lafisha Sakena Haisa. So plain reading of that Baal HaTurim sounds like she was old. She was 127. So she passed away. It's sad, but it's not the same tragedy as if she would have passed away in the prime of her youth. Therefore, he cried, but it wasn't so big. It wasn't such a big crime because that's just the way of the world. People get to 127 and they pass on. Plain reading of the Baal HaTurim. Now, it's problematic, though, because that Baal HaTurim seems to indicate that Avraham was this great tzaddik, this great Baal Chesed. His feelings of loss for Sarah were somehow or another lessened by the fact of how old she was. That seems very odd. I wrote down the next thing I have is the question. I remember reading, I couldn't find it. I was trying so hard to find it and I could not. I'll keep it up. There was a beautiful story I had read about Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, that when his mother passed away, he had a very, very old mother. And when she passed away and he was sitting shiva for her, oh, was he crying? He was beside himself. And some of the Talmidim asked him, they said, Rabbi, we're just trying to understand. Your mother was very old. She lived a long and productive life. She saw so much nachas, and she was sick, and now she's not. She's out of pain. Okay, it's sad that she's gone, but why are you crying and carrying on to this degree? So Rav Kook responded saying, I'm not crying for her. You're right, all that. I'm crying for me. Who's going to call me Avremela anymore? There was one person in the world, that mother's love, that I felt that she called me Avremela. And who's going to call me Avremela anymore? I feel that loss. So you're right. So she was old. She lived a long life. But now I miss her. So you could ask the same thing on Avram Avinu. Okay, Sarah lived to 127. It's not the greatest tragedy. But he just lost his partner, his life partner, his beloved wife. What does it mean, Vlibkosa? It's just a little bit of crying because she was 127. That was his beloved companion through life. They had been through so much together. Who cares the fact she was 127? There's plenty to cry about. So it's on the surface, it's a very difficult Baal HaTurim to understand. But we're going to see some commentaries that might make some sense of it. In order, before we see those commentaries, let's just see what Rashi points out. And we kind of spoke this out already, but let's see what Rashi says. L'spod l'sara v'libkosa, that he came back to Hebron to cry, to eulogize for Sarah and also to cry for her. So Rashi quotes, and Rashi says, is quoting from the Medrash, V'nismacha misa Sarah la'kedas Yitzchak. The juxtaposition, the last parsha of Vayera concluded with Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak, and Chayei Sarah, as the following parsha, begins with Sarah's death. That's no accident. He says, Lafi shal yidei besuras Akeda. It's because as soon as Sarah heard about the Akeda, shenizdamed b'no l'shchita, that her son was this close to being slaughtered, ukamat l'shalon eshchat, and he just escaped by a little bit. Parcha nishmasa mimenu v'mesa. That's what caused her to die. So he's quoting the Medrash and says, the final straw, what was it that the Malach HaMavis, you could say, finally had his entrance into Sarah and taking Sarah's neshama, was that she was distressed about the fact of the Akeda. So that's what the juxtaposition. The Akeda occurs at the end of Parshas Vayera, Sarah dies. Okay, let's see what Rabbi Frand has to say. He's going to quote from a sefer that addresses this. Let's see. So this I found, there's a link, you can see it online. Let's read it together. It's very, very nice piece he has there. In the pasuk, and Abraham came to mourn Sarah. The letter Chaf in the word liv kosa, and to cry for her is written a small letter. The Baal HaTurim gives a reason for this. Since Sarah lived to the ripe old age of 127, the mourning of such a person is not that overwhelming. This is indicated by the smaller size in a letter in the word for crying. I saw an interesting interpretation in the Sefer Kehilas Yitzchak from Yitzchak of Volozhin. The Medrash explains the juxtaposition that we just saw in Rashi, the story of Akedas Yitzchak with the death and burial of Sarah. According to this Medrash, the Satan appeared to Sarah and told her that Avram took Yitzchak to offer him as a sacrifice on an altar. Before Sarah had a chance to hear the end of the story, her soul flew away from her and she died. We know from the Medrashic teaching that our sages that the Satan had tried to pull out all the stops to prevent their patriarch Abraham from carrying out his test of Akedas Yitzchak. The event was such a seminal event in Jewish history, which resulted in eternal merit for the Jewish nation, that the Satan tried every trick that he had to stop Abraham from passing this test and achieving the reward for his descendants that he eventually achieved. The Midrashim say that Satan changed himself into a river. Avram had to wade up to his neck to cross the river, etc., etc. Once a person does a mitzvah in his life, no matter what type of wicked person he later becomes, the credit for the mitzvah will not be taken away from him. The rule in spiritual reward and punishment is that a sin cannot extinguish the effect of a mitzvah, and a mitzvah cannot extinguish the effect of a sin. There are two separate accounts in heaven, debits and credits. The fact that a person has debits does not take away from the credits. When a person does a mitzvah, the mitzvah is done. It will always remain with him. There is, however, one exception to this rule. This is something called regretting what was originally done. The Hebrew is toeh al harishonos. If a person performs a mitzvah and later comes to regret the fact that he did it, that regret causes him to lose the reward that came from doing the mitzvah. So let's just stop for a minute here. Refrain is quoting the Sefer Kilos Yitzchak, which is saying, in general, we have an idea that once someone does a mitzvah, you can't take that away. That's in the credit ledger. Just because I may have done some averos, that doesn't take away the mitzvah. I'll have to pay for the averos I did, but it doesn't take away the mitzvah. If I did a mitzvah, it is always there. There's one exception. There's only one way I could lose a mitzvah. That's toeh al rishonos. If a person says, you know what? I regret giving that tzedakah. You know what? I regret doing that chesed. You know what? I regret shaking that lulav. If a person would say such a thing, that he regrets having done the mitzvah, I wish I never did it, then he could lose the mitzvah. So let's see where he goes with this. When the Satan saw that he was unsuccessful in deterring Avram from doing the Akedah, he did not give up. He had one more trick up his sleeve. Although Avram had earned the reward for passing the test of the Akedah, so the reward was in the bank, if the Satan could get Avram to regret performing the mitzvah, Avram would lose the reward. This is exactly what the Satan tried to accomplish by bringing about the death of Avram's wife through her hearing about her husband's participation in the Akedah. There is no force in the world that is as persistent, that is as big a nudge as the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, which is a Satan. Even when we think the battle is over, the battle is not over. I once heard in the name of Rav Aaron Kotler, after the Akedah, the pasuk says, and behold, an individual ram was caught up in the underbrush. Why does the pasuk need to tell us the seemingly insignificant detail? It is to show us that Satan had still not given up. The Satan was trying to make it hard for Avram to find a substitute animal to offer. So he had to cut through the dense underbrush to get the ram free, that it might be offered in his place of his son. He was doing everything he could to stop this. Here too, with Sarah's death, Satan tried to put another obstacle in Avram's way, of Avram keeping the reward that he had already earned. It was yet another test to see whether he would now regret his willingness to sacrifice Yitzchak, because it apparently led to the death of his wife. So here's what the Satan did. It was no mistake. Why did he go out of his way to make it that Sarah should die as a result of the Akedah? Hoping that Avram would say, "Oi, if I only knew what my actions was going to cause, I never would have done this. I regret going through with the Akedah." That's what he was trying to do. That's what the Satan was trying to do by causing Sarah to die right after hearing about the Akedah. He wanted to get Avram to regret it. This way Avram would lose the schar. So he continues, Avram Avinu did not want this to happen, so he purposely downgraded his crying for the death of Sarah. That's the small chaf, to indicate that her time was up already, and that he was not going to let her death upset him to the extent that he would regret his participation in Akedah. So the Baal HaTurim is telling us it's not that Avram was uncaring. Oh, she was 127. There's nothing to cry about. That's not what's going on. This was the tool that Avraham utilized so as not to regret the Akedah. He had these feelings of guilt that the Satan was causing him to have, saying, "Oh, Vey, what did I do? I went through with the Akedah. I killed my wife Sarah." So he says, No. Don't start going down that route. She was 127 years old. It makes more sense to say this was her time. It was not the Akedah that killed her. This was her time. Hashem would not have allowed that to happen. So that's the way he's explaining this Kilas Yitzchak there. My friend is quoting, that's the way he's explaining this Baal HaTurim when he says it was a small chaf that he minimized the crying because she was old. It's not that he was uncaring. It was saying this was the tool that Avram Avinu employed to make sure that he would not come to regret the Akedah. He said it makes sense. It was the natural course of events that Sarah died. She was 127 years old. That's what he says, to indicate that her time was up already. He was not going to let her death upset him to the extent that he would regret his participation in the Akedah. As a result of this, the merit of the Akedah remained with Avram, and was preserved for his descendants for all generations. The practical lesson from all this is that the Yetzer Hara never gives up, and we must be forever vigilant against its wiles. I thought a beautiful shot that my friend had, quoting the Sefer Kehilas Yitzchak, to help us understand and make sense of that Balaturim. That jogged my memory because I remember seeing something so similar. You'll see it's a little bit different, but so similar in the name of Rav Pam Zatzal, Rav Avram Yaakov Pam. Here's on page 2, beautiful picture I found online of him and his Rebbetzin. So there's Rav Pam smiling and his Rebbetzin, and this is you'll see it's a very similar thought. She was also Nifteris a couple of years ago. So let's see. It says Parshas Chayei, so he quotes our pasuk about how Sarah died at the age of 127. It says Parshas Chayei begins by recording Sarah's lifetime was 127 years, the years of Sarah's life. That seems redundant. If Sarah lived 127 years, isn't it clear that these were the years of her life? What is the seemingly superfluous expression at the end of the verse coming to tell us? Again, look at that pasuk. Vayu Chayei Sarah me'ah shana ve'esrim shana ve'sheva shanim. Period. You should end there. 3 more words. Shnei Chayei Sarah. Those were the years of Sarah's life. So Rav Pam wants to know, what's those last 3 words? They seem extra. They seem redundant. They seem superfluous and repetitive, right? You catch the drift. Those last 3 words, they seem to be extra. So he says, Rav Avram Yaakov Pam notes that Rashi writes, and we saw this Rashi above, that Sarah's death was juxtaposed to the Akedah to teach us the shock she experienced upon hearing that her son was almost killed was the cause of her death. Realizing this, somebody might mistakenly assume that if not for this tragic turn of events, Sarah would have enjoyed many more years or even decades of her long and productive life. To counter this erroneous conclusion, the Torah emphasizes that these were the years of Sarah's life. This is what she was allotted. And if not for this episode, she still would have died in some other manner at the exact same time. That's the pasuk telling us. Vayu Chayei Sarah, shana v'esrim shana v'sheva shanim, shnei Chayei Sarah. That's it. Hashem controls the world. Those were the years that was allotted to her, and that's when she died. What do you mean? She died because of news in Akedah? Okay, that happened to have happened right then. But the reason that she expired when she expired is because God runs the world and decided that's all that she was given, 127 and no more. Rav Pam often used this message to comfort those grieving the loss of a loved one. It often seems that if the doctors would have only tried a different treatment, or if an accident could have been averted, the relative would still be alive. Painful as every loss is, Parshas Chayei teaches us that each person is given his own uniquely allotted lifespan, and nothing we think could have done differently could have prevented this person's death from one cause or another. So he's saying this is what Rav Pam would often use. People were torturing themselves. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should have done this. I should have used this physician, gone to that hospital, tried a different protocol. He would say, listen, the pasuk says, Shnei Chayei Sarah, you did your hishtadlus, you did your best. Once we know we've done our best, we have to, we're going to make ourselves crazy. We'll pull our hair out. We'll go mad. We have to have firm belief in the fact that God runs our world and he decides how much time everyone in this world is supposed to have. Along these lines, this is an interesting one. It's apocryphally said that when the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, received his job, he complained to Hashem, said that he'll be universally cursed and hated for his actions, and requested a different assignment. Hashem replied, don't worry, nobody will you. They'll always attribute it to a heart attack or to car crash or to illness, right? How many people look at it and say that person died of the Malach HaMavis? No one says that. That person died because of A, B, C. So that's the joke, so to say, that Hashem said, don't worry, Malach HaMavis. No one's going to ever assign the blame on you. They're going to find every other thing to blame it on instead of focusing that it was you. Part of our belief and trust in Hashem is to internalize that a person does not die because of anything written by a medical examiner. The true cause of death in every single case is that Hashem decided the person's mission was complete and the time on earth has come to an end. It's a tough lesson, but that can be very comforting to have in our toolkit when we're ever discussing with someone who's feeling tortured, or feeling a sense of, I should have done this. Maybe if I would have done this, this could have had a different outcome. We did our ishtadlus. We tried our best. As long as we tried our best, now we say Hashem runs the world and we can't make ourselves crazy. We'll just tear ourselves to pieces. And that was what Rabbi was saying, the lesson of Shnei Chayei Sarah. And perhaps that also fits back with that Balaturim, is that the Balaturim said it's a small chaf, that Avraham cried just a little bit because she was old. What does that mean? He was not sensitive? No, maybe the Balaturim is focusing on the same point that Rav Pam was saying here, is that Avram did not beat himself up and saying, oh my gosh, I killed her. It was my actions at Akeda that killed her. He was saying, no, she was 127. That was the amount of time God allotted for her. No more, no less. I'm not blaming this on myself. Maybe that's how he'd explain that Balaturim as well. Now, here's what really shocked me is all of a sudden, I saw this in an earlier source. We're going to see a couple this afternoon, a couple Divrei Torah from the Tosefes Bracha. The Tosefes Bracha, we've quoted him before. This was a commentary written by Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein, the author of the Torah Tamima. He wrote another Perush on Chumash later in life. His additional thoughts was called Tosefes Bracha. It's obviously a play on words. His name was Baruch Halevi Epstein. So Bracha is like Baruch, and Tosefes means the additions. This was a latter commentary that the Torah Tamima wrote on Chumash. So he called it the Tosefes Bracha, the additions, the blessed additions, but it means the additions of Baruch. So look what he does. This is almost exactly what Rav Pam says here. Shnei Chayei Sarah, and he's again writing this at the early part of the 20th century. Shnei Chayei Sarah, what does it mean? These were the years of Sarah. So he writes as follows: Lo nispar al ma bal lashon zeh. The Torah, what's the point? Why are these three words there? They seem extra, superfluous. And you can explain this based on what we saw in the Medrash. Shesibas misasa. What caused Sarah's death? The Satan told her that Avram slaughtered Yitzchak, or was about to. Mitoch charada, and because of her fear, parcha nishmasa, her soul flew out of her body. Avoanan kaimalan, but what do we hold? The inish below zimnei enomes, that no person dies unless it's their allotted time. How could it be that she died and it wasn't her allotted time? Based on this, that's why the pasuk wrote Shnei Chayei Sarah. These were the years and the amount of time that was allotted to Sarah. Klomar, the Eila Mispar Shanim Shechashav Khan. These years that we just counted here, 127, Me'av Esrim Sheva, Hayu Kitsuvim Lo Lachios V'Lo Yoser. That's all God had allotted for her to live, nothing more. Vodas HaSatan Haisarak LeHafsakas Chayam Uvas. All the Satan did was the Satan said, this was the mechanism that was going to bring her allotted time to an end. But it's not like if the Satan had showed up, if she hadn't found out about the Akeda, she would have lived more. That was her time. That's how the Malach HaMavis took her. The Malach HaMavis took her this way. He could have taken her another way. That's how the Malach HaMavis took her. But don't think for 1 second that if it wasn't for this, she would have just kept on going. So this is the message in a little bit different words. This is what Rav Pam was saying. Very, very important lesson. And I think it's something we all have to remember. Another thought that just came to my mind was, I remember it's a little over 3 years ago now, one of my Rabbeim, I went to Yeshiva High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Wisconsin Institute for Torah Study. And one of my Rabbeim passed away a little more than 3 years ago, Rabbi Rafal Waxman Zatzal. Such a wonderful, wonderful person. And I remember after he passed away, I wanted to write something about him. And some of the family members, when I shared some of my memories, they encouraged me. They said, "Yeah, can you please write an article? It would bring a lot of nechama to his wife, to his Rebbetzin, and to some other members of the family." So I said, "Of course, I would happily do that." So it was in the summer after he passed away, and I composed an article and I sent it to one of his sons to just look at it. And was there any additions, anything that he thought I should reword, anything he wanted me to take out, anything I asked him to look it over before I submitted it for publication. And he said to me, Akiva, I would ask you to just change one thing. I said, what's that? I wrote Rabbi Waxman's untimely passing. And he said, think about what you're saying there. Untimely passing seems to indicate that he did not pass away at the right time, at the time that was allotted for him. That's not what we believe. We have no idea why HaKadosh Baruch Hu our father wanted Rabbi Waxman to pass away exactly when he did. was at a much younger age than what we would have wanted. We thought he had so much more to accomplish, so much more to contribute, so much more to add to the world and to his yeshiva, and to all the students and to his family. We would have loved, but we don't know why. But Hashem decided this is it. It wasn't untimely. We don't understand it. It wasn't untimely. We got to think of a different word to use. So I said, you're 100% right. It's a good nuanced point. I'm happy you caught that. And we'll change that. So I don't remember what word I used instead. Maybe we wrote, sad passing or tragic passing. I don't remember what word, or shocking passing. We used something else, but we didn't use the word untimely. And I remember that was what one of his sons, it was Gavi. That's what Rabbi Gavril Waxman, that's what he pointed out to me. I'm happy that he caught it, but it also shows where he's holding that. Here he was at a point where his father was taken from him at a point in life much earlier than what he and the whole family would have liked. And here he was saying with Emunah Shalema, it wasn't untimely. He believes that there's a Dayan HaEmes, there's a true judge that's running this world, who's orchestrating the events. We don't know why. We don't know why he called him back at this stage much earlier than what everyone would have liked. But don't use the word untimely. It made a big impact on me, and that really resonates in this message from Rabbi as well. I want to share two more thoughts with you. Both of these are from the Tosefes Bracha. Once I was looking at him, I said, let me see what else he has on this parsha. And I found a couple of fascinating thoughts. I want to share them with you. It's two more. So now we're on page 4. So page 4, this is when Eliezer, he's sent on a mission to find a wife for Yitzchak, and he finds Rivka. He goes back to Avram's homeland and he finds Rivka there. And now he doesn't just take Rivka and bring her back. He's got to go speak to the family, convince them who he is, why he's there, and have their permission. Ask Rivka's permission too, but the family's permission to just take her away and to go marry Yitzchak. So he's describing to the family, to Lavan, to the whole family, he's describing to them all that he's experienced on this journey. And Eliezer says, V'avo hayom el ha'ayin. So I came today to the ayin, is like a fountain or a wellspring. V'amar Hashem Elokei Adoni Avram, and I turned to God. He prayed. He said, "Oh Lord, the God of Avram, my master Avram, im yesh chano matzliach darki. If you really desire for me to succeed on my way, on my path, asher ani olech aleh, that I'm going, here's what I'm going to want." And he asks God for a sign, a very specific sign, that I'm going to approach a girl, ask for something to drink, and before just saying, "Sure, here's something," she's going to first offer to give my camels something to drink. She's going to be a massive balas chesed, someone who's just got chesed, kindness, and her interest in performing acts of kindness is just oozing from her blood. And that's how it played out. That's how he meets Rivka. But look at what he said in that pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'avo hayom el ha'ayin." So I came today to the fountain, or to the well. So Rashi is going to quote a medrash. He wants to know, what does it mean? Why is he emphasizing today? Don't use the word today. Just say, "V'avo, I came to the fountain." And of course it's today. He met Rivka and he came to the house. So what did he do? He first stayed at the hotel for a couple of days before he comes to meet her family. He gave her all these gifts. Of course it was today. Why is he emphasizing Vavo Hayom El Ayin? Today I came to the well, to the fountain. So Rashi quotes the Medrash and says, Hayom Yatsasi, you're not going to believe it, but today I left Hebron. Today I left Avram's house in Hebron, or according to some, it's in Beersheba at that point still. So today I left Avram's house. I was sent on my mission. Vayom Basi, on the same day, believe it or not, I made it back to what would be modern day Iraq, because that was Avram's homeland. The same day I made it. What a journey. And there's no jet planes back then. How did that happen? The only way to explain this is that God shrank the earth, meaning he shortened the way for him. Something miraculous happened. What should have been a journey with his camels that should have taken days or weeks, he pulled it off the same day. He left Avram. That was when he ended up in Aram Naraim. So that's wild. I remember learning this in elementary school. It's amazing what sticks with you. And I remember that one of my Rabbeim in elementary school, I think it was Rabbi Fishman, Zechron Livracha. I think it was Rabbi Fishman who said this. How did he explain this concept to us? He says, next time you go to the airport with your parents to go, meet a relative, or if you're traveling anywhere, go look at the airport, and they have those moving sidewalks. What do those moving sidewalks accomplish? They let you cover more ground than you should have if you were just walking alone. So he says as follows. He says, he goes, in his mind, he referred to those moving sidewalks at the airport as the Kvitzas Haderach machines. Those are the machines that shorten their way. And to this day, Layla and I just returned. We were in New York for a bar mitzvah, for a nephew's bar mitzvah the other week. And you could ask her, she was laughing at me. Whenever we get to the airport, that little second grader in me comes out, is that whenever I see one of those moving sidewalks, I kind of smile and I say, we're getting on the Kvitzas Haderach machine. It's absolutely amazing what can stick in our minds if we have a good educator, we have a good teacher at a very, very young age. I always think of this, and it's just wild. Anyhow, that's Rabbi Fishman to think. But that's what Rashi quotes the Medrash here, is that a nace happened, a great miracle happened. There was Kvitzas Haderach, God shortened the way, gave him one of those moving sidewalks, and Eliezer and his entourage, all those camels, they left Avraham the same day that they arrived by Lavan and met Rivka. So let's look at the Tosefes Bracha here. So the Tosefes Bracha's got a good question. He says, "Vavo Yom Alayin, today I came to the well." Rashi kan b'shem Medrash. Rashi here quotes the Medrash. The Kavanas Lashon Zeh. What's this getting at? Hayom Yatsasi v'Hayom Basi. Today I left Avram, and believe it or not, I arrived here the same day. Mikan shekatzala derech. God did a massive miracle, shortened the way for him, gave him moving sidewalks. Ad kan Lashono. That's what Rashi says. The lo nisbar, but what's not explained is le'eza tachlis sipur zos. Why is Eliezer repeating this? He's dealing with a bunch of people in modern day Iraq. They're not interested. They're not believers in Hashem. They're not going to get a kick out of this nace. He has no way to prove it. He has no way to. Why is he sharing this? That's something to tell Avram about. When you go back home, say, Avram, you're not going to believe it. Because you're such a tzaddik and Hashem loves you so much and I'm your agent, I'm working for you. He made this massive nace, this incredible miracle that I was able to make it there in one day. Tell this to Avram. Why is he sharing this information with Lavan and Besuel, with Rivka's father? Why? So look what he suggests here. I thought this is a very creative answer. The Karov Lomar, what makes a lot of sense to me to explain this is as follows. What did we write earlier in Pasuk Yud? B'Sheva Medrash. The Medrash said the B'Shashi Yatsa Eved L'Darko, that when Eliezer left to go on his way, Nasan lo Avram Shtar Matana, Avram gave him to take on your journey. Here is a Shtar Matana. Here is a contract. Here is a document stating that I am gifting Hashem Yitzchak Al Kol Asher Lo. I'm going to find a shidduch for Yitzchak, and I got to encourage this family to send their daughter back with me to Canaan to marry this fellow Yitzchak. That's a big ask, asking people to say, I want to take your daughter back to my master Avram so she can marry the son. Sight unseen, you haven't met him yet. What's going to encourage that to happen? Avram must have written up a shtar, a contract, saying all of his possessions are hereby bequeathed. They're all given to Yitzchak. So now Yitzchak just became the most eligible bachelor. So Eliezer will have a much easier time convincing a family to send their daughter back to Canaan with him, because she's going into a house of royalty. She's going into a palatial setup where she'll live a life of luxury. So Avram certainly gave Eliezer a shtar, a contract, or a documentation that he should present to whoever the potential mechutanim would be, to say that the boy that she's going to marry is absolutely loaded. He's inheriting everything that his father has. So the Medrash says he certainly had a shtar matana. So let's see what the Tosefes Bracha does with that. He says, I'm on that, okay. I'm sorry. Al kol asher lo laman yirazos lahorei anara, because he wanted Eliezer to show this documentation to the parents of the young girl that he would find. Kafi anog, and according to the common practice, hayakaser b'shtar yom aksiva v'chasima. You always write a date on there. There's no such thing as a shtar, as a contract, as a document, an official document without a date, that it was written and that date it was signed. Miyom sheyatza l'derech. So when would it have been written and signed? On the day that Eliezer left on his way, that he hit the road. Uba'ofen tivi. Now, if nature had run its course, he should have been on the road for many days. It takes a long time to get from Israel to Iraq by camel. But since this miracle happened, that he got there on the same day because God shortened his way, the same day that the shtar was written, If he did not tell Lavan and Besuel what happened to explain this, they would have said, you're a liar, you're a fraud. It makes no sense. You can't possibly be telling us the truth. Here you are claiming to be the Eved Avram, the servant of Avram, and you're telling us you came all the way from Canaan, and that Avram is a very rich man, has bequeathed all of his possessions to Yitzchak, and here's your document to prove it? Look at the calendar. It was written today. How did you get here? What do you mean? If this was all true, this should have been written a week ago, and then it makes sense. You were on the road. How do you have a document that was signed this morning, and now you show up in Haran telling us that you've traveled all that way? So Eliezer has to explain. That's what he says. The dates wouldn't add up. That's why Eliezer had to reveal this nace. So I thought that was a very logical explanation. Is that, again, he's bothered by Rashi. Why is he sharing this? Lavan, they're gonna care about this. He's got to say, you're not gonna believe it. I got a great Ashkacha Prata story. Avram will appreciate good Ashkacha Prata stories. Why is he sharing this with Lavan and Besuel? Answer is, he had to. Otherwise, they would have said, you're a liar. You're a fraud. It doesn't make sense. How could this paperwork have been signed this morning and now you're already here? You were in Canaan, according to this paperwork. How's it here? He says this incredible miracle happened. That's how he says. I thought that was a very, very interesting answer, very logical. But what that also tells us is something to think about. Always think about is, does our story line up with what's around us? And that's what Eliezer was thinking. One last thought from the Tosefes Bracha. I thought this is a beautiful thought I want to share with you. This last thought from the Tosefes Bracha is going on at the end of the Parsha. After Yitzchak marries Rivka, the Torah tells us that Abraham did not die all alone. He remarried at that late stage in life. The pasuk says, "Vayosef Abraham vayikach isha shmo Keturah." Abraham continued. He takes another wife whose name was Keturah. According to the Medrash, this was Hagar. That Yitzchak went and found Hagar and brought her back to marry Abraham because she had been chased out years earlier by Sarah. He knew Avram it was not good for him to be all alone, especially as he was aging. And he felt that Hagar would be the one who was best suited to take care of him and look after him and be together with him in the sunset of his life. So Yitzchak arranges, the pasuk tell us, he went to Be'er Lachai Roi and he brings her back. So he marries her. Now look what the next pasuk says, pasuk Beis. Vateled lo, she gave birth to Avram as Zimran, as Yikshan, that's 2. Midan and Midyan, 4. That's Yishbak Veshuach. He gives birth to 6 children. So Keturah gives birth to 6 children at the end of Avram's life. So these are half brothers to Yitzchak. He's just as related to them as he is to Yishmael. They have the same father. The pasuk goes on to say, Avram sent them away. Kedma al Eretz Kedem. He sent them away while Yitzchak was still alive. He sent them away to the east, to the land of the east, so that they shouldn't be in the house. But he had these 6 children at the end of his life. Beautiful idea from the Tosefes Bracha I want to share with you. On the last page, it's page 5, I believe. Yeah, page 5. Look what he writes here. Davar Pelahu, something astonishing takes place in these psukim. I never stopped to think about it. I'm so happy he stopped and he realized this, the Tosefes Bracha. He says, don't you just realize you just read something amazing? Terem nolad Yitzchak, before Yitzchak was born, lo ha'amin Avram b'koach told us so. Avram himself did not believe he had the power, he had the physical ability to father children. He had given up hope. Bamro, when Hashem first told Abraham that he's going to have a child, he laughed. He says, Halaben me'yash shana yivaled. Could it possibly be that someone who's nearly 100 years old is going to give birth? So he says it can't happen, but derech hateva, by natural means, stuff like this doesn't happen. That was Avram's reaction. Yitzchak nolad b'neis miyuchad. If Yitzchak was born, it was through a massive miracle. Yotze megvul hateva, went beyond the laws of nature. Kmo shamar Hashem, like what God Himself said. Hayipalei me Hashem davar. Is anything impossible for God to pull off? Umiyaz nolad Yitzchak. And from the time Yitzchak was born, Ad Asher Nasas Rivka, until he married Rivka, Avru Arba'im Shana, 40 years went by. Parshas told us, like the matter says at the beginning of told us, and the Psukim seem to indicate this as well. Yitzchak ben 40 shana b'kachto es Rivka. Yitzchak was 40. The Pasuk says it straight out that Yitzchak was 40 years old when he got married. So if Yitzchak was 40 when he got married, how old was Avram? Avram ben Me'av 40 shana. He was just about 140 years old when Yitzchak gets married. And it was only after Yitzchak gets married that he marries Keturah, that Avram married Keturah. Nisuav shalo ata haya l'raglei nisue Yitzchak. The pasuk clearly states that Avram's second marriage was only after Yitzchak got married. You clearly see this, that he got married after Yitzchak got married. That means what? Ben Me'av 40 shana nasa isha. That means Avram's second marriage to Keturah was when he was 140 years old. Holy Shisha Banim, and he gave birth. He fathered 6 kids with her. The pasuk says it straight out. And nowhere does the Torah indicate that, oh my God, something miraculous happened. This is astonishing. How do you explain this? This is Avram was shocked. How can I possibly be blessed with Yitzchak? And that was he was not even 100. Now he's 41 years later, and he's pulling off having 6 kids. So what is going on? What? This is astonishing. So look what he writes here. Lamar Bea Pella. Because this is so astonishing, Tzarech Lomar. The only way to explain this is as follows. Api Mashamar b'Maseches Tanis. Chazal tell us, I looked it up this morning, there's 2 places Chazal tell us this. One is in Maseches Tanis, and the second place is in Maseches Chula. And again, 2 different contexts that Chazal tell us this, but it's the same essential message. Gemiri, which means Mekubal Atzlenu. We have a Masorah, we have a tradition. The Mishmaya Miyahiv Yahiv. That from the heavens, meaning God, he gives his blessing. Mishkal Lo Shakli. He does not take away blessing. Perish Rashi. Rashi explains it in the Gemara. When heaven blesses a human being with good, God doesn't take it away. God gives someone a certain skill. God gives someone a certain blessing. That's it. And they're going to carry that blessing for the rest of their life. Therefore, when God blessed Avram, he went beyond the laws of nature once. When he blessed Avram with the ability to father Yitzchak, that wasn't a one-time shot that, okay, I'm going to give you the virility and I'm going to give you the ability to have a sperm count. I'm going to, it's for his one-time shot. No, I'm making you someone who has the power to father a child. That's it, moving forward. That is your blessing. God gives, he doesn't retract, he doesn't take back. When God blessed Avram to have the ability to father a child before Yitzchak was born, he never took the bracha back. That's the way God operates. When God gives a bracha, it's with that person, it's with that party for life. God doesn't say it's a one-time event, there's a bracha, that bracha is with you for life. And that's amazing. So when we think about this and we ask and we daven all the time for brachas, we ask Hashem for refuahs, we ask Hashem for yeshuos. This is something to think about. What are we asking for? We're not asking for a shot in the arm. We're not asking for a one-time event. A bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu has some serious power to it. And that power, if someone is zoch, if someone merits having that bracha, that could take them through not just one event, but carry them through life and get them through situations where it never would have made any sense that they should have been able to carry through. The only way to explain it is they had God's blessings. I was thinking about that this week for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons that came up is tomorrow is the yortzeit of Layla's paternal grandmother, Mrs. Helena Feintuch, and her name was Henya Rivka Bas Shmuel Aleha Hashalom. It's her yortzeit. Her first yortzeit is going to be tomorrow. And the family always referred to her as Crown Heights Bobby. Crown Heights Bobby because they had 2 Bobbies. They had a grandmother who was her maternal grandmother. She was Borough Park Bobby because that's where she lived. And there was Crown Heights Bobby, that's where she lived. It was in Crown Heights. And she was a Holocaust survivor. And it's amazing because you think about this, and I think it applies to her life and to so many Holocaust survivors as well. There's no reason to explain why one person survived and another person. They were in the most horrific situations, the terrible situations. So many times could have come up over the course of the Holocaust where they should have died. People next to them, to the right, to their left, died. Why did they survive? There's no way to explain it other than just saying, for some reason, God plucked them out. But it wasn't a one-time event because there were so many scenarios that they faced during those awful years. It wasn't a one-time event. God, for whatever reason, chose certain people for life that you're going to carry on. You've got a mission to accomplish. And that bracha didn't end at a one-time event. It wasn't through this one selection. It wasn't through this one event. It wasn't this one death march. It was event after event after event. And this seems to be what the Gemara is saying there, is that Mishmaya, Miyav Yahiv, God gives a gift from the heavens, Mishka lo shakle, but he never takes it away. Once HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed somebody, saying, you will live, they will live and they will thrive regardless of the circumstances they face, because there's just no way to explain it. They got through time after time after time again, and even after those warriors ended up in a displaced persons camp, and then it come as a penniless refugee, and to be able to have some atzlacha, and to be able to restart, to marry, to start a family, and to raise children, and then grandchildren, and make a living, and nachas, and to live a very long, productive life into her 90s. The only way to explain this is to say the bracha that she received, that you will live, was not a one-time event. It's an illustration. It's a proof of what Chazal were saying. Mishmaya miyav yav. Once the heavens, once HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm giving you something, mishkal lo shakli. They don't take it away. It's not a one-time deal. It sticks with the person for life. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses someone with a goodness, he doesn't take it away. And if we ever needed an illustration of this, if I needed a vivid illustration to this saying is true, this teaching Chazal is true, I could look at Crown Heights Bobby, who was a beautiful woman. She was a woman who accomplished so much. She was a strong woman, and she was a loving woman, shared so much with her family, her memories, her love, everything that she shared with the family. It's something that made an incredible impression upon everyone who was Zocha, everybody who was privileged to see her. She was a mother, she was a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and a great-great-grandmother. Absolutely amazing, and everybody got chizuk from her. But this is one thing that I was thinking of her when I saw this Chazal, and when I looked up the Gemara. She was a true illustration of this. So this is something to bear in mind. When we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we ask Hashem for his blessings, just so we understand and that we recognize the power of those blessings. They are awesome. They are incredibly potent. So let's not take those blessings lightly, and let's daven for them. Let's ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for his heavenly blessings, because as the Gemara says, Chazal, and as Rashi explains it, when Hashem truly does grant someone a gift from heaven, min hashamayim, shuvei not l'nosam mimenu. He doesn't take it away. It sticks with us for life. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer all of our tefillos. May Crown Heights Bobby's neshama have an aliyah, and may Hashem answer all of our tefillos, and may she continue to be a Melitza Yeshara, a trusted advocate for her family that she loves so much, and for all of Klal Yisrael. Have a great day, everyone. I hope you enjoyed some of these sources, and we should all have a good week and a